Dr. Emily Carter, in her 20 years as a speech therapist, had seen 47 cases of selective mutism. Not a single one had spoken again after 7 years of silence. That's why, when she received the call from Michael Thompson at 6:18 in the morning on November 14th, telling her that his brother-in-law David Miller had just uttered the name of his deceased wife, Sarah, she thought it was a tasteless prank, but it wasn't. And what Dr. Carter would see in the videos that Michael sent her 3 hours later would forever change her understanding of silence, of music, and of the miracles that are born in the hands of people that no one sees. But to understand this story, we have to rewind exactly 7 years to November 14th, 2018, the day David Miller lost his voice. And something much more important. It was a Friday night. It was raining. David was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway with his wife, Sarah, sitting beside him. They were coming home from dinner with friends. Sarah was 4 months pregnant with their first child. They had decided to name her Lily. David was a literature professor at State University. He spoke 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. His students said he had the clearest voice they had ever heard, that when he read poetry in class, the entire room would fall silent. Sarah was an architect, the sister of Michael Thompson, who owned 8 hotels across the United States. But Sarah never wanted to work in the family business. She preferred designing public schools, houses for families who had nothing. That night, at 11:42, a semi-truck lost control in the rain. The impact was instantaneous. Sarah died before reaching the hospital. Lily, too. David survived. Skull fracture, 6 broken ribs, a cervical spine injury, and something the doctors didn't fully understand at first, a lesion on his vocal cords. Partial, not complete. When he woke up 3 days later in the hospital, Michael was there, with red eyes, having not slept since the accident. David opened his mouth to ask about Sarah. Nothing came out. He tried again. Nothing. Michael took his hand, and in a broken voice, told him the truth. Sarah hadn't survived. Lily either. David closed his eyes and never tried to speak again. The doctor said the injury was physical, damage to the vocal cords, recoverable with therapy, a 90% chance of speaking again in 6 months. But 6 months passed, and David remained silent. A year passed. Silence. 2 years passed. Silence. 3 different neurologists examined David. The diagnosis was the same. The physical injury had healed. The vocal cords were functional. But there was something more, something psychological. Trauma, guilt, severe depression. Dr. Ramirez, the most honest of the 3, told Michael the truth that no one else wanted to say. After 7 years of voluntary mutism, the chances of recovery were less than 2%. The brain forgets how to speak. The muscles atrophy. The voice simply disappears. David became a shadow. He lived in Michael's house, an estate in Beverly Hills with 8 bedrooms. David occupied one, the furthest away, the quietest. Michael took care of him, out of obligation, out of guilt. Because Sarah was his sister, because the last words Michael had said to Sarah before the accident had been in a stupid argument about the family business. They never had a chance to reconcile. So Michael took care of David as a way to apologize to a sister who could no longer hear him. But there was no connection. Michael worked 14 hours a day. David spent his afternoons in the house's library, looking out the window, without reading, without writing, without anything. 7 years passed like this, until Maria Rodriguez arrived. Maria was 46 years old when she started working as a housekeeper in the Thompson house. It was April 1st, 2023. She had been widowed for 2 years. Her husband, Robert, had died of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, the same disease that killed Stephen Hawking during the last 2 years of his life. Robert couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could only blink, Maria had been a music therapist. She had worked 12 years in a children's hospital, using music to help children with traumas express themselves. But after Robert died, Maria couldn't continue. She resigned, sold her practice, put all her instruments in boxes, except for one, Robert's harmonica, an old silver harmonic with the initials R.M. engraved on the side. 1997, the year they met. Maria kept that harmonica in her nightstand drawer. She looked at it every night before going to sleep. And every night, she asked herself the same question. If she had tried music therapy with Robert sooner, when he could still make sounds, even if not words, would it have changed something? Would she have been able to give him a way to communicate? A way to say, "I love you," one last time? She didn't know, and that question haunted her like a ghost. When Maria arrived at the Thompson house, Michael gave her the basic instructions. Clean, cook, wash, and one special rule. Do not disturb David. David is my brother-in-law, Michael told her. He lives here. He doesn't speak. He doesn't like company. Just leave his food at the library door. Don't try to converse. Don't try to help. Just leave him alone. Maria nodded, and for the first 2 weeks, she obeyed. But Maria was observant. She had spent 12 years reading the body language of children who couldn't speak. She knew how to see what others didn't, and what she saw in David wasn't a man who couldn't speak. She saw a man who didn't want to live. It was in the small details, the way David touched his throat when he looked at Sarah's photo in the library, as if he were searching for something that was no longer there. The way he closed his eyes when he heard music on the radio, not with pleasure, with pain. The way that every November 14th, David stayed in his room all day, without eating, without leaving, as if he were waiting for that day, finally, to finish dying. Maria saw it and understood. It wasn't that David couldn't speak. It was that he had decided on some deep and unconscious level that he didn't deserve to speak, that his voice had died with Sarah, and that living in silence was his way of doing penance. It was in the 3rd week that Maria made a decision. One morning, after Michael left for work, Maria went up to her small apartment in East Los Angeles. She opened her nightstand drawer and took out Robert's harmonica. She cleaned it, held it in her hands for 10 full minutes, crying silently. Then she put it in the pocket of her apron and went back to the Thompson estate. It was 11 in the morning when Maria entered the library to clean. David was there, as always, sitting in the armchair by the window, gazing out at the garden, holding Sarah's picture in his hands. Maria cleaned in silence, and when she finished, she left something on the coffee table, the harmonica. She didn't say a word, just left it there, as if she'd forgotten it by accident, and she left. David didn't touch it that day, nor the next, nor for the entire week. But Maria noticed something. Each day when she came in to clean, the harmonica was in a different place, first on the table, then on the arm of the armchair, then on the bookshelf, then next to Sarah's picture. David was moving it. He was looking at it, but he wasn't playing it. 2 more weeks passed. And then, one morning at 5:47 a.m., Maria heard something that made her stop dead in her tracks in the middle of the kitchen. A sound, faint, tremulous, barely audible, the sound of someone blowing into a harmonica, without melody, without rhythm, just air, passing through metal, creating a note, a single note, broken and beautiful at the same time. Maria put down the coffee cup she was holding. She went upstairs in silence. She stood in front of the library door and listened. David was trying to play. He didn't know how. He had never played an instrument in his life, but he was trying. He blew another note, then another, out of tune, clumsy, but they were sounds. And Maria knew at that moment that something had begun, something small, something fragile, but something real. She didn't go in. She didn't interrupt. She just listened for 5 minutes, until David stopped. Then Maria went downstairs, sat in the kitchen, and cried because that broken melody, that series of meaningless notes, was the same melody that Robert used to play in the good days, before the illness stole everything from him. Somewhere over the rainbow. Maria had never told David what song it was. She had never given him instructions, but somehow David had found those notes, as if the universe was reminding Maria of something she had forgotten, that music isn't something that's taught. It's something that's found in the darkest places when there's nothing left. The next day, Maria left a note next to the harmonica, handwritten, brief. This harmonica belonged to my husband. He passed away 5 years ago. He couldn't speak for the last 2 years of his life. But he played this every day, and when he played, I knew he was still there, that he hadn't completely left. You can keep it if you want. Maria. David read the note. And that night, for the first time in 7 years, he didn't spend November 14th locked in his room. He spent 3 hours in the library, trying to play a melody he didn't know, but that somehow he felt he needed to learn. 2 months passed. David played every morning, 5:30 a.m., before Michael woke up, before the world started moving. Maria listened from the kitchen, never interrupting, just listening and documenting. She bought a notebook, blue, cheap, 150 pages, and every day after listening to David, she wrote down what she had heard. Day 30, 3 notes, out of tune, but held for longer. Day 45. He tried a scale, failed, tried again. Day 67. 5 notes from somewhere over the rainbow, recognizable. Day 89. He played 3 notes in a row without error. Maria didn't know what she was doing. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a goal. She just knew that something was happening, something that all the neurologists and 7 years of silence hadn't achieved. David was coming back, not with words, not yet, but with sounds. And the sounds, Maria knew, were the first step. It was on day 127 that everything changed. Maria entered the library at 6 in the morning, as always. David was there, with the harmonica in his hands. But this time, he wasn't alone. There was a video playing on his phone, a YouTube tutorial, how to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow on harmonica. David was trying to follow it, pausing the video, trying the notes, failing, trying again. Maria stood in the doorway, not knowing whether she should leave or stay. Then David saw her, and he didn't stop. He kept playing, looking at her, as if he were asking without words, "Is it okay if I try this?" Maria nodded, slowly. And for the first time in 2 months, Maria didn't just listen. She went in. She sat in the armchair opposite David, and when David played the first 3 notes correctly, Maria smiled. David smiled too, and Maria knew that she wasn't alone in this anymore. Another 2 months passed. Maria started to teach, not with words. David couldn't respond, but with gestures, with demonstrations, Maria hummed the melody. David tried to replicate it on the harmonica. He failed, tried again, failed again. But each day he failed a little less. Michael didn't know anything about this. He left the house at 7, returned at 9 in the evening, ate dinner alone in his office, reviewed reports, slept 5 hours, and repeated. He didn't see what was happening in his own house. He didn't see that David no longer spent all day staring out the window. He didn't see that the harmonica, which used to be put away, was now on the table, used, loved. He didn't see that Maria no longer left the food at the door. Now she left it in the library, and sometimes she stayed, and they ate together, in silence, but together. Michael didn't see any of it until day 180. It was a Saturday. Michael came home early, 10 in the morning. Unusual. He had cancelled a meeting. He heard music from the library. It wasn't the radio, it was a harmonica. Michael went upstairs, slowly, confused. He opened the library door, and saw something he didn't expect. David, sitting in the armchair, with a harmonica in his hands, playing, and Maria, sitting opposite him, with a blue notebook open in her lap, listening. Michael stood in the doorway, speechless. David stopped. He looked at Michael, and for the first time in 7 years, Michael saw something in David's eyes that he hadn't seen since the accident. Fear. Not fear of Michael. Fear of losing this, whatever this was. Maria got up quickly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry. I was just..." Michael raised his hand. "It's all right." He looked at David, then at Maria, then at the harmonica, and then he saw the notebook. Blue, open, with Maria's handwriting filling the pages. Day 180. He played the entire melody, without errors. 3 minutes. He cried when he finished. Michael took the notebook. He flipped through it, page after page. 180 days, 180 entries, each one documenting a small advancement, a small miracle. Michael looked up. He stared at Maria. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. 6 months, Maria replied. "Why didn't you tell me?" Maria glanced at David, then back at Michael. "Because you told me not to bother you. And I thought, if I told you, you'd ask me to stop." Michael closed the notebook. He sat down, slowly, as if his legs could no longer support him. He looked at David. "You can speak." It wasn't a question. It was a plea. David shook his head, slowly, his eyes filled with tears. Michael nodded. He stood up, and without saying anything else, he left the library. Maria thought she would be fired, but the next day, when she arrived at work, there was a note from Michael on the kitchen table. "Keep doing what you're doing, and keep me informed." Maria kept that note, and she continued. But something had changed. Michael was no longer absent. He started coming home earlier, not much, just 30 minutes and then an hour. But it was a change, and he started to notice things. He noticed that David no longer ate in his room. Now he ate in the dining room, with Maria, in silence, but present. He noticed that the library, which used to smell of dust and silence, now smelled of fresh coffee, of life. He noticed that David had started showering every morning, getting dressed, shaving, small things, but important. And he noticed that Maria was no longer just an employee. She was the reason David was still there. Another 2 months passed. Day 234. Maria was in the library with David, as always. 6 in the morning. The estate still asleep. David was playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. He no longer needed the tutorial. He knew it by heart. Every note, every pause, every breath. When he finished, Maria applauded softly. David smiled. And then he did something Maria didn't expect. He opened his mouth and tried to sing. Nothing came out, just air, a raspy whisper, barely audible. But Maria saw something, a small movement in David's throat, his vocal cords vibrating, trying to form a sound. David tried again. He put the harmonica on the table, touched his throat with his hands, and tried to make a sound. Any sound, just air. But Maria knew what it meant. After 7 years, David's vocal cords were waking up. David looked at Maria, his eyes filled with hope and fear. Maria nodded, slowly. "It's working," Maria said. "Keep trying." David closed his eyes and tried again. This time, something different. It wasn't a word, not even a vowel, but it was a sound. Low, guttural, broken, but real. David opened his eyes, touched his throat with his hands, as if he couldn't believe that sound had come from him, and he cried. Maria stood up, went over to him, and for the first time in 6 months hugged David. She didn't say anything, just held him, while David cried on her shoulder. 7 years of silence, coming out all at once. When David calmed down, Maria pulled away and said something that would change everything. "I'm going to record this, so that when you really speak, You can see how far you've come." David nodded. And the next day, Maria started recording. Day 250, David making guttural sounds, 5 seconds of video. Day 260, trying to say the letter A, 15 seconds. Day 278, first recognizable vowel, 10 seconds. Day 298, David playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, complete, without mistakes. And at the end, trying to sing the first 3 words. Somewhere over the... Only air came out, but the intention was there. Maria recorded that entire video, 47 seconds, from the beginning of the melody to the attempt to sing. And when David finished, Maria had tears in her eyes, because in that video, Maria saw what 3 neurologists had said was impossible. She saw a man who was learning to live again. That night, Maria showed the video to Michael. Michael watched it 3 times without saying anything, just watching. The way David held the harmonica, the way he closed his eyes when he played, the way he tried to sing when the video ended for the 3rd time. Michael looked up. He stared at Maria. "You think he's going to speak?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Maria held Michael's gaze. "I don't know, but he's trying. And that's more than he's done in 7 years." Michael stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the dark garden. The doctors said it was impossible. Less than 2% chance. Maria didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was soft but firm. "The doctors don't know him like I do. They don't see him every morning. They don't see how he touches his throat every time he hears his own voice in his head. They don't see how he cries when he manages to make a sound. The doctors see statistics. I see David." Michael turned around, looked at Maria with something she hadn't seen before. Anger. "You're giving him false hope." Maria stood up, faced Michael. "I'm giving him a reason to live, which is more than anyone else has given him in 7 years, including you." The silence that followed was brutal. Michael clenched his jaw, looked at Maria as if he was about to fire her, but then something in his face broke, and Michael sat down, put his face in his hands, and spoke with a voice that Maria could barely hear. "I'm afraid." Maria sat down next to him, slowly. "Of what?" "That it will work, and that it won't work. That David will speak, and the first thing he says will be that he hates me because Sarah died and I couldn't save her. Because the last words I said to her were cruel. Because I've been a coward for 7 years." Maria didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she put her hand on Michael's hand. "If David speaks, it won't be to blame you. It will be to forgive you. Because that's what people who have been silent for so long do when they finally find their voice. They speak of love, not of hate." Michael looked up, stared at Maria. "How do you know?" "Because my husband was silent for 2 years before he died. And the day before he died, he recovered his voice for 5 minutes. 5 minutes after 2 years. And the only thing he said was, 'Thank you, and I love you.' Nothing else. Because when you don't have much time left, you only say what matters." Michael nodded slowly. And for the first time in 7 years, Michael cried for his sister. Maria let him cry. She didn't touch him, didn't console him. She was just there. When Michael calmed down, he stood up, wiped his eyes, and said something Maria didn't expect. "I'm going to start coming home early. I want to be there when it happens." Maria nodded, and Michael kept his word. The next day, Michael arrived home at 6:30 in the morning. David and Maria were already in the library. Michael didn't go in. He just stood outside the door, listening. David was playing. Maria hummed along. And finally, David tried to sing, just air, but an attempt. Michael listened for 20 minutes. Then he went downstairs, made himself coffee, and left for work. But something had changed. Michael began to cut back his hours. 14 hours a day became 12, then 10. He started having breakfast at home, with David and Maria in silence, but together. He started asking questions. "How was your day? Did you make any progress? Do you need anything? And he began to see what Maria had seen from the beginning, that David wasn't a burden. He was his family, and Michael had abandoned him. 2 more months passed. Day 345. 20 days before November 14th. 20 days before, it would be exactly 7 years since the accident. David was in the den with Maria, as always. But this time, Michael was there too, sitting in the armchair in the back, watching. David played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, perfectly, as if he'd been playing it his whole life. When he finished, Maria smiled. "Now, try to sing." David nodded. He put the harmonica on the table, touched his throat, closed his eyes, and he tried. At first, just air. But then, something changed, a sound, low, raspy, guttural, but recognizable. The letter S, then another, O, then M. Michael leaned forward, holding his breath. David opened his eyes. He looked at Maria, then at Michael, and he moved his lips. Some. It wasn't clear. It was broken, scratchy, barely audible, but it was a syllable. The first syllable in 7 years. Maria covered her mouth with her hands, crying. Michael stood up, took a step forward. "David, you said something. You did." David looked at Michael, his eyes filled with tears, and he shook his head. "Not yet, but soon." He didn't use words, but Michael understood, and in that moment, Michael knew that Maria was right. This wasn't false hope. It was a miracle. Slow, painful, but real. Michael walked over to David. He knelt in front of him and said something he'd been holding in for 7 years. "I'm sorry for not being there, for leaving you alone, for not being the brother Sarah would have wanted me to be." David closed his eyes. More tears fell. And then David did something Michael hadn't seen in 7 years. He smiled. It wasn't a full smile. It was small and fragile, but it was real. And Michael knew that David had forgiven him. The next 20 days passed in a new routine. Michael arrived at 6 in the morning. He sat with Maria and David. He listened to David play. He watched him try to speak. Day 350, David said the letter A clearly. Day 355, he said the syllable Sar. Day 360, he tried to say the full name, Sarah. It didn't come out completely, but almost. And then came day 365, November 14th, 2025. Exactly 7 years after the accident. Michael didn't sleep that night. He stayed awake all night, thinking about Sarah, about Lily, about the 7 years he'd lost with David. At 5 in the morning, he got up, went down to the kitchen. Maria was already there. "You're not going to work today," Michael said. Maria shook her head. "Today, I'm staying, no matter what." Michael nodded. At 6 in the morning, they heard the den door open. David walked downstairs. Slowly, he looked tired, as if he hadn't slept either. He walked into the kitchen, looked at Michael, then at Maria, and then he did something neither of them expected. He walked to the table and put the harmonica in the center and sat down. Maria and Michael sat down too. David picked up the harmonica. He held it in his hands for a long moment. Then he raised it to his lips and played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, complete, without mistakes, without pauses, 3 minutes of perfect music. When he finished, David put the harmonica on the table. He looked at Michael, closed his eyes, opened his mouth and spoke. "Sarah." The voice was broken, raspy, scratchy, as if it came from a very distant place, but it was clear. It was his voice. Michael stopped breathing. Maria covered her mouth, crying. David opened his eyes. They were filled with tears. He looked at Michael and tried again. "Forgive me." 4 syllables, broken, separated, painful to hear, but real. Michael stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. "David, my God, David." David tried to say something else, but his voice broke. He coughed. touched his throat. Maria got up, brought him water. David drank slowly. Michael was standing in the middle of the kitchen, trembling, unable to believe what he had just heard. "I need to call Dr. Emily Carter. Now!" It was 6:18 in the morning when Michael dialed Dr. Carter's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy. "Michael Thompson." "What's wrong?" Michael took a deep breath, tried to speak. He couldn't. So he handed the phone to Maria. Maria spoke in a trembling voice. "Dr. Carter, this is Maria Rodriguez. I work for Mr. Thompson. He needs you to come. Now. It's about David." "What happened?" He spoke. David spoke. After 7 years, he spoke. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "That's impossible. Cases of mutism after 7 years. They don't recover. The statistics." "With all due respect, doctor, the statistics are sitting in my kitchen, just saying words." Dr. Carter arrived an hour later. She entered the house with her medical bag. Serious, skeptical. Michael led her to the den. David was there, sitting in the armchair with the harmonica in his hands. Dr. Carter sat down in front of him. "David, I'm Dr. Emily Carter. I examined you 3 years ago. I was told you spoke this morning. Is that true?" David looked at her, nodded slowly. Then he closed his eyes and spoke. Yes, one word, clear, raspy, but perfectly understandable. Dr. Carter was stunned. "My God!" She took out her stethoscope, approached David. "I'm going to examine your throat. Is that all right?" David nodded. Dr. Carter spent the next 20 minutes examining David. She palpated his throat, listened to his breathing, asked him to say vowels, to cough, to make sounds. David obeyed everything, with difficulty, with pain. But he obeyed. When she finished, Dr. Carter sat down, looked at Michael, then at Maria. "The vocal cords are functioning, not 100%, I'd say about 40% capacity. The voice is raspy because the muscles are atrophied, but they're functioning. After 7 years, she looked at David. "This is medically impossible, but you're talking." David smiled, weakly. Sick. Music." Dr. Emily Carter frowned. She looked at the harmonica in David Miller's hands. "What does music have to do with this?" Maria Rodriguez stepped forward. She handed the blue notebook to Dr. Carter. Everything. Dr. Carter read the entire notebook. 365 entries, each documenting a day, a small step forward, a note, a sound, a syllable. When she finished, Dr. Carter closed the notebook and looked at Maria with something that seemed like amazement. "You did this. Without medical training, without therapists, without medication, just with a harmonica and patience." Maria shook her head. "I only gave him the harmonica. He did everything else." Dr. Carter looked at David. "Can you tell me why you decided to try to speak again?" David closed his eyes. He thought for a long moment. Then he opened his mouth and with great effort said a complete sentence. "Because she taught me that I'm still alive." 8 words, separated, painful, but a complete sentence. The first complete sentence in 7 years. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. She put away her stethoscope. "I'm going to be honest. I don't know how to explain this. I'm going to have to document it, write a report, maybe an article, because this shouldn't be possible." She looked at Maria. "But it is, and you made it possible." Michael Thompson, who had been silent the whole time, finally spoke. "What happens now?" Dr. Carter stood up. "Therapy, intensive vocal therapy. The vocal cords are functioning, but weak. He needs exercises, every day, for months, maybe years. He won't recover his voice completely, but he can improve." She looked at David. "If you really want to speak, you have to work. It's going to hurt. It's going to be frustrating, but you can do it." David nodded. "I will." Dr. Carter smiled, for the first time since she arrived. "Then I'll see you in my office next week. And bring that harmonica, because it clearly knows something I don't." When Dr. Carter left, Michael sat next to David. "You did it. After 7 years. You did it." David shook his head. He pointed to Maria. "She did it." Maria shook her head, with tears in her eyes. "No, David, it was you. I just gave you the instrument. You played the music." David smiled, and then he said something that left both Michael and Maria speechless. "Robert would be proud." Maria broke down, crying. Michael hugged her, and David, for the first time in 7 years, stood up. He walked towards them and hugged them too. They didn't say anything else. They just stayed there, the three of them, embraced in silence. But it was a different silence. It was no longer the silence of loss. It was the silence of peace. 3 months passed. David went to vocal therapy 3 times a week. Each session lasted 2 hours. It was exhausting, painful, frustrating. But David didn't miss a single time. Michael reorganized his schedule to take David personally. He reduced his work hours from 14 to 8. He hired a co-CEO to manage the day-to-day operations of the hotels. And for the first time in 7 years, Michael began to live in his own house. Maria continued working, but her role had changed. She was no longer just a housekeeper, she was family. Michael tripled her salary. From $8,000 to $24,000 a month, he offered her a room in the estate. Maria accepted, and every morning at 6, the three of them met in the library. David played the harmonica. Maria listened. Michael made coffee. It was their ritual, their way of remembering where they had been and how far they had come. David's voice improved, slowly, very slowly. In the first month, he could say 5-word sentences without coughing. In the second month, he could talk for 10 minutes before getting tired. In the third month, he could hold a conversation, short, with pauses, but real. And then, one morning, David said something to Michael that changed everything. "I want to go back to teaching." Michael put down his coffee cup. "Teaching, as in giving classes?" David nodded. "Literature, like before?" Michael looked at Maria. Maria nodded. "I think he's ready." Michael thought for a moment. "Then I'm going to call the university. I'm going to see what can be done." It turned out that the state university had never forgotten David Miller. When Michael called, the head of the literature department answered immediately. "David Miller, the best professor we ever had. How is he?" "He's speaking again, and he wants to come back to teach." There was a silence. "That's impossible. He was mute for 7 years. The medical records said it was irreversible." "The medical records were wrong." The director paused. I want to talk to him." Michael passed the phone to David. David took it. With trembling hands, he put the phone to his ear, and he spoke. "Director Ramirez, this is David." "David, good God, it's really your voice." "Yes, it's hoarse, but it works." The director was silent for a moment. Then he spoke in an emotional voice. "We want you back. Not like before, not full classes, but we have a new program. Small classes, 20 students maximum, twice a week. For professors with special needs, it would be perfect for you." David closed his eyes. More tears. "When can I start?" "Next semester, in 2 months." David smiled. "I'll be there." When he hung up, David looked at Michael and Maria. And for the first time in 7 years, David laughed. It wasn't a complete laugh. It was small, hoarse, broken, but it was pure joy. Michael hugged him, Maria too. And in that moment, the three of them knew that the miracle wasn't that David had recovered his voice. The miracle was that they had recovered their family. 2 months later, David gave his first class since the accident. It was a small room, 20 students. They all knew his story. They were all there because they wanted to be. David entered the room at 9 in the morning, with the harmonica in his jacket pocket, for luck. The students stood up when they saw him enter, and applauded. David stopped, surprised, moved. "Thank you for Being here. His voice was hoarse, slow, but clear. A student in the first row raised his hand. Professor Miller, it's an honor to have you back. David smiled. The honor is mine. The class lasted an hour. David spoke about Ernest Hemingway, about the old man and the sea, about how silence can be as powerful as words. He had to pause, drink water, rest his voice, but he finished. And when he finished, the 20 students stood up and applauded again. David left the room with tears in his eyes. Maria and Michael were waiting outside. How did it go? Michael asked. David couldn't speak. His voice was exhausted. Then he pulled the harmonica from his pocket and played 3 notes. The first 3 notes of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Maria and Michael understood. It had been perfect. That night, the 3 of them had dinner together at the house. Michael cooked, David set the table, Maria brought the wine, and for the first time in 7 years, Michael Thompson's estate felt like a home. During dinner, David wrote something on a napkin. He still couldn't talk much without getting tired. He passed the napkin to Michael. Michael read it aloud. Sarah would be proud of you, of us. Michael folded the napkin, tucked it into his pocket, and nodded. I know. Then, David wrote something else. He passed it to Maria. Maria read it. Robert, too. Maria smiled through her tears. I know. And in that moment, the 3 of them knew something that didn't need to be said. That Sarah and Robert hadn't gone anywhere. They were there, in every note of the harmonica, in every word David spoke, in every hug they shared. They were in the music, and music never dies. 2 years passed. David Miller became a legend at State University. Not because he was the most eloquent professor. His voice was still raspy, limited. He couldn't speak for more than 30 minutes without resting, but he was the most present professor. He arrived an hour early to every class, stayed 2 hours late. He knew the name of every one of his students, knew their stories, their struggles, their dreams, and at the end of each semester, he did something that no other professor did. He played the harmonica, just one song. Somewhere Over the Rainbow said 3 minutes, and then he told his students something that had become his most famous line. If I could find my voice after 7 years of silence, you can find yours. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how lost you feel, the voice is always there. You just have to find the music that awakens it. His classes filled up every semester. There was a waiting list, students traveling from other universities just to hear him. And in the 2nd year, David did something that no one expected. He wrote a book. It was called 7 Years of Silence, a memoir of loss, music, and redemption. It was short, only 200 pages, but every page was brutal in its honesty. David wrote about the accident, about Sarah, about Lily, about the 7 years he spent wanting to die, but not having the courage to do it. He wrote about Maria, about the harmonica, about the 365 days that saved his life. He wrote about Michael, about forgiveness, about how sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you lose. The book was published in March of 2027. In 3 months, it sold 50,000 copies. Not because it was a commercial bestseller, but because it touched something deep in the people who read it. The need to believe that no matter how broken you are, you can still heal. David donated all the book's profits. He created a foundation. It was called the 7 Years of Voice Foundation. Its mission was simple: to help people with mutism, trauma, or loss of voice find alternative forms of communication through music, art, therapy. Maria was appointed director. Her salary tripled again, from $24,000 to $72,000 a year. But Maria didn't accept all the money. She donated half of it back to the foundation. I don't need that much, she told David. I just need to know I'm helping. The foundation started small, 10 patients in the first year, all with stories similar to David's, Trauma, loss, silence. Maria worked with each one personally, not always with harmonicas, sometimes with guitars, drums, pianos, whatever worked. And in the first year, 3 of the 10 patients recovered their voices. Not completely. Like David, their voices were limited, raspy, and fragile, but they could speak, and that was enough. By the second year, the foundation had grown. 50 patients, 5 therapists, 3 locations in Los Angeles. By the third year, 100 patients, 15 therapists, expansion to San Francisco and San Diego. And the success rate remained the same. 30% of patients recovered some form of voice. It wasn't a high percentage, but it was infinitely better than the 2% offered by traditional medicine. Dr. Emily Carter became a medical advisor to the foundation. She wrote 3 scientific articles about David's case, documented every stage, every advance, every setback, and in 2028, she presented her research at the International Congress of Phoniatrics in Madrid. The title of her presentation was simple: When Medicine Fails, Music Speaks, the David Miller Case and Music Therapy-Assisted Vocal Recovery. 300 doctors attended. At the end of the presentation, when Dr. Carter showed the 47-second video of David playing the harmonica and trying to sing, the entire hall went silent. And when she showed the video of David 2 years later, teaching at the university, speaking in a raspy but clear voice, the hall erupted in applause. Several doctors approached her afterward. They wanted to implement the protocol in their countries: Spain, Argentina, Colombia, Chile. Dr. Carter accepted all the requests, and in 5 years, the vocal music therapy protocol was being used in 15 countries. Michael Thompson changed too. He no longer worked 14 hours a day. His new schedule was 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, 6 days a week. Sundays were sacred for family. He hired a permanent co-CEO, a woman named Patricia Ruiz. Brilliant, efficient, capable of managing the 8 hotels without Michael's help. And Michael invested his free time in something he never thought he would do: music. At 54 years old, Michael Thompson learned to play the piano. He wasn't good. He would never be a concert pianist, but he didn't care. He played for David, for Maria, for himself, and every Sunday morning, Michael, David, and Maria met in the library. Michael played the piano. David played the harmonica. Maria sang. They weren't professionals. The music was imperfect, out of tune sometimes, but it was theirs. And in those moments, the 3 of them knew they had found something that money could never buy: peace. In 2029, 4 years after David first spoke, something extraordinary happened. State University awarded Maria Rodriguez an honorary doctorate in music therapy. Maria had no college education. She had studied up to high school. Everything she knew about music therapy she had learned working, practicing, trying, but the university recognized something that degrees couldn't measure. Maria had saved a life, and in saving it, she had created a method that was now saving hundreds more. The ceremony was in May, in the main auditorium of the State University. 500 people attended. David was in the front row, crying. Michael was next to him, also crying. And when Maria walked onto the stage to receive her diploma, the entire auditorium stood up. The president of the university gave her the diploma, and then he asked her to say a few words. Maria took the microphone with trembling hands, and she spoke. "I don't know what to say. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a housekeeper who lost her husband and didn't want anyone else to lose someone they loved the same way." She paused, looked at David. "David Miller didn't need me to save him. He saved himself. I just gave him a harmonica. He did everything else. And if that makes me a doctor, then every person who has shown kindness to someone in their darkest hour is one too." The auditorium erupted in applause. and Maria walked off the stage directly into the arms of David and Michael. The three hugged, crying, laughing, and in that moment, Maria knew it had all been worth it. The pain, the loss, the 7 years of seeing David in silence, it had all been worth it. Today, in 2030, 6 years after David first spoke, the 7 years of Voice Foundation continues to grow. 200 patients a year, 30 therapists, 10 locations in the United States, expansion to Colombia and Spain. 1,000 patients have gone through the program. 300 have regained some form of voice. It's not a massive miracle, but they are 300 individual miracles. 300 people who thought they would never speak again, and now they can. David still teaches. Now he gives classes 4 times a week, and he still plays the harmonica at the end of each semester. His voice never regained its original clarity. It's still raspy, limited to 30 minutes before he gets tired, but it's enough. Maria continues to run the foundation, and every morning at 6 a.m., she still meets with David and Michael in the library, no longer to teach, just to remember. Michael still plays the piano, and every Sunday, the three make music together, and Robert's harmonica, the one with the initials MR engraved on the side, is still in David's hands. But now there are others, 50 more harmonicas, each given to a patient of the foundation, each with the hope that the music can do for them what it did for David. Awaken something everyone thought was dead. The voice. 7 years of silence, 730 hours of music, a harmonica that cost $15, and a housekeeper who knew something that 3 neurologists didn't. That sometimes the path back to the voice doesn't go through the throat, it goes through the heart. And the heart opens with music, not with expensive medicine, not with complex therapies, not with empty promises. Just with someone who sits with you in your darkest moment, who gives you an instrument, who listens to you trying, who doesn't give up when you fail, who celebrates when you manage a single note, someone who reminds you that you're still alive, and that while you're alive, you can still find your voice, no matter how long it's been, no matter how broken you are, no matter how many people have told you it's impossible. The voice is always there. You just need to find the music that awakens it, and sometimes that music comes in the hands of the person you least expect, the person who cleans your house, who prepares your food, who lives in the shadows of your life, the invisible person who turns out to be the only one who really sees you, because Maria Rodriguez didn't see a mute man when she looked at David Miller. She saw a man who had forgotten how to live, and she taught him something more valuable than words. She taught him that life isn't measured in what you say, it's measured in what you do when you're out of words, in the music you play, in the people you love, in the silences you share, and in the decision each day to try one more note, even if it sounds broken, even if it hurts, even if no one else believes it's possible, because voices aren't lost forever. They just fall asleep, waiting for someone who has the patience to wake them up. And when that person arrives, it doesn't matter if she's a doctor or a housekeeper. It only matters that she's willing to stay, to listen, to believe when no one else does. That's the true definition of a miracle. It's not something that falls from the sky. It's something you build, note by note, day by day, during 730 hours, until one day, after 7 years of silence, you open your mouth and you speak, and the world listens. Not because your voice is perfect, but because it's yours, and because someone believed it was worth hearing, even when you yourself had stopped believing.